Okay, so this is our Family 460 Amazing Grace Final, and this is Cassie and Diva, and we'll get started.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just start off with question number 1. What doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? Why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart and to be passionate and persistent?
Do you want me to go first?
It's okay. Whichever. Okay. We'll just kind of go like back and forth, I guess.
Okay. Go ahead, Cassie.
Okay. So I kind of had several different thought processes with this question because like I never felt like there was just like one doctrinal point where he was like, this is, you know, the only thing that I could come up with like one specific doctrinal point was that all men are created equal.
Yeah.
And but my favorite part was when he, like, when he first had all those people come over to his house and he was talking about whether he didn't know if he was supposed to be in politics or to do God's work. And that lady was like, well, I think it's obvious you should do both.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like a super powerful, like pretty cool moment. I have more, but we can just go like back and forth, kind of just nice discussion.
Yeah. So I think that the doctrine that he had in his heart was that he had found God. So when he was like laying in his backyard, like in the field, and his servant came and he was like excited. He's like, I found God. And I don't, like, he didn't know what to do with it, but he knew that God had saved him. And that I think because he had that faith, because that testimony was growing inside of him, he wanted to help his fellow men, and he wanted to help. Yeah. I think it grew from that desire, like from being converted or from feeling the Spirit. Somehow he had a desire to change like the injustices around him, not only like the slave trade, but later, like you could just tell he just wanted to help everybody overall. So I think I
know my little heart melted at the beginning when they were beating that horse. Yeah. And he stopped and he's like, if you stop beating him, maybe he'll get up. And I was like, protect that little horse, please. Like, stop.
You know, that's so funny because I saw the movie, I saw it once, and then my husband saw it, and I just saw the very beginning because I started writing my report and he just kept watching it. But I didn't catch on to that. I'm like, what are they arguing about? Because I think I wasn't paying attention. But in my mind, when I was watching the movie, I'm like, that poor horse, they keep hitting him and stuff. And then I saw it the second time, and he's like, oh, he came out to defend him. Like, that's awesome.
No, I'm like, animals is one of the things for me where I'm like, oh, Diva, are you still there? Uh-oh. Diva. We'll have a brief intermission while Diva gets back on.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
No, you're good. You're good.
Lost connection, and then the screen went blank.
All right. No, you're good. You're all good. I figured something weird would something weird happen.
I know, and I saw it still said live, so I was like, oh, okay. Anyways.
Yeah, no, we're good. But yeah, no, that was, I don't know, right off the bat, I was like, okay, I can be friends with this guy. He's like cares enough even about like the animals, and I thought it was cute. Like he had, I don't know if you caught it, because like I was trying really hard to focus, but I was super sick yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I was like halfway trying to stay awake.
Yes.
But he had like a fox and a hare and a couple of like other, and I think he said like a bat or something. I don't know. Just like a couple of like random little animals that he'd saved, you know. And I think that you're so right when he just realized that he did have a purpose because he was a child of God.
Yeah.
And he might not have seen it directly like that way, but I feel like that's really what it was. And the second part of the question says, why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart and to be passionate and persistent? And my thought process was, sorry, my dogs are like wrestling right here, so this is shaking. The world is just super selfish. Like it's so selfish. People are so selfish, and like government's so selfish, and they don't understand yet that a family is what will make, like having good, strong families is what will make the world better. Having good, strong families will make the world prosper. They don't understand that yet. So they're just trying to figure out how best to serve themselves, and they're doing it in all the exact opposite wrong ways. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why it's so important to understand why the doctrine of family is so important, because the world is so confused right now, and we need to be the ones who aren't confused and who do know what is really gonna keep us strong and prosperous.
Yes, I agree. Like 100%. I liked what you said about we need to know because the world doesn't know. And I wrote down 2 quotes that I liked from that chapter, from that lesson. And the first one is by Yuri Bronfenbrenner. He said, the family is the most powerful, the most humane, and by far the most economical system known for building competence and character. And the other one's by President David O. McKay. And he claims that no success can compensate for failure in the home. And I just thought those words are so powerful, because if people understood that, you know, like we know as Latter-day Saints that the family unit is fundamental. And, you know, God, we are the most important to him. And that's why he puts us in families, to learn and to grow and to support each other. And that's why I chose this major, because I said there's nothing else that I want to major in than
that's more important.
Yeah, that's more important. And I think this class ties it all in, because it's like, okay, what are you going to do with that knowledge? And how are you going to let others know or share? Because like you said, like people don't know, like they're selfish and they grow up like that, and then their kids grow up like that, and that this has become our society, that these principles aren't important. And I think it's our job to help others understand that they are, because we are making the children of the future, and with principles and with, you know, everything, like getting them ready to go out into society and be good people. And if you have like a broken foundation, then they it affects everything. It's like a domino.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why it's important to know those things.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The last thing that I kind of focused on with this was that the family is the exact center of God's plan. Everything about God's plan is centered on the family. Mm-hmm. And just like you said, without that foundation, nothing else will work.
Yeah.
And so I think you hit it exactly spot on. Is for generations now, people have been slowly turning away from these things. And the generations right now, they don't know any better.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of trying whatever they think will work, and they don't realize that it's not the right path.
Yeah.
So I think you hit it spot on when you said that this major and this class is a really good way of bringing that full circle and just truly understanding the importance of why we are called to do this. Okay. Question, guys, chill out. How did Wilbur employ a theoretical Bronfenbrenner approach to become a more effective advocate? Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific. This one was kind of hard for me, so I kind of just like, I don't know. I was like, I'm going to just go with it.
Yeah.
So I put out each of the systems or whatever, and then I just put something that I thought.
That's what I did too.
That, okay, right on. So for microsystem, I put that he realized that he himself was called to do the work that he was doing, and he knew that it was his personal destiny to fight for the abolishment of slavery.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the first one, it does like that theoretical map or whatever. It starts with himself, and it's exactly what you just said. He found what he was passionate about, and he knew he eventually, found out that he wanted to do something about it. So he was like, like he found God, and he that was like the very first thing, like himself, like he knew what he wanted to fight for.
Yeah, I agree. For the mesosystem, I said that he looked towards those he knew and cared about for support and help in fighting the abolishment battle.
Yeah.
So, like, the people that were directly involved in his life, like his pastor, and then I could never get it if that guy was his cousin. The
prime minister.
I can't ever. Yeah, the prime minister. If that was his cousin, that was what I was.
I don't know.
Or just like a really good friend. I could not tell.
Yeah.
It was really hard because I couldn't keep straight all their names. And so I was like, that one guy, and the redheaded chick, she helped him. And he was like in that direct, line of influence or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So
there was definitely parts in the movie I had to keep going back because there was things, and I had it on subtitles too.
Oh, see,
the language.
Oh, that's
sometimes
yeah.
Sorry,
mine was really cool, and so like I just couldn't hear very well. I didn't even realize you could put subtitles on. That's genius.
Yeah, I watched it on Prime, Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
nice.
I didn't have to watch it
That's
on my
awesome.
computer, so I got to like type and do it.
Oh, nice. I had like this tiny little half screen where I was like watching it on that page, and then like a tiny little half screen. I'm like, this is so great. I can't hear a word that's happening, but this is awesome.
Yeah, I did that on purpose because I was like, oh no, I really need to understand it. It was, the language, I needed the subtitles, so it's a little easier for me, but.
No, that's awesome.
I'm sorry about the printer. I don't know why it started.
No, you're fine. You're just fine.
Oh,
don't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So he found his friends. He decided he wanted to share like his knowledge with his friends, and then he asked the preacher for advice. He went to the preacher for advice because he was torn between following God and being a politician. Like that was one of his moments that he was like, what do I do? And I think his preacher friend kind of helped him decide a little bit.
Yeah. I definitely agree. That was powerful to have the preacher just be like, please, like, whatever you do, just do it.
Yeah.
Like, do it. So I definitely agree. The next one's the exosystem. He went out of his way to find information from others who weren't in the same position he was. He went to those people who normally he wouldn't have direct contact with.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Like, he went to the slave ships and like 2 different places to find people who would, you know, talk about their experiences. So I felt that was a great way that he got involved with people outside of his direct line of influence.
Yeah. I combine the exosystem and macrosystem. I think they kind of go hand in hand, but I think the macrosystem talks about like people's beliefs. So I just wrote that he was able to persuade others. Some were even members of Congress around him by being an example, but not being overbearing. And then he shared his point of view and told people why he felt the way he did. And then I thought it was cool, like when when his friend invited all those people over his house. They were talking about him like he was almost like he was famous, and he gave them hope. Like he didn't even know, you know, that what he was doing, like standing up and basically telling others that he was against slavery and that he wanted to do something about it. Like it gave other people hope in other cities that were like, oh, there's a man, you know, that's willing to fight for us. And I think it all, like those things that he did, like had an effect on other systems, and it all came together.
Yeah. Kind of like his lady friend, how like they'd never met, but she like knew the whole thing.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I read that. What did he write? Like he would write like bill, like maybe she was a
the bills.
Yeah. And she agreed.
But you know, I thought that was a cute little dynamic. I put for the macro system because, like you said, it was kind of more like beliefs and like social standings, like you mentioned. I put that Wilbur worked hard to share his stance with fellow political members as well as his fellow community members. With the abolishment bill being such a huge social issue, he had to convince an entire society that it needed to be changed.
Yeah.
And like back in that time, it, you know, as obvious as the other political members were about how not okay they were about it, you know, like that's a daunting thing to just go in there and be like one of the only people to try and change such an, not even just like a nationwide issue, but a worldwide issue.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
And he never gave up. Just kept going.
And then the last one's the chrono system, which is just basically how time affects. So just like you said, like he never gave up, even though like it took a long time for everybody else to kind of understand it and get it. And it took a lot of different experiences happening and things happening in the world to be able to get to where they finally understood that slavery needed to be abolished. But over that period of time, he never gave up. And the thing that I thought was interesting was that even though he had like waves of like intensity of how involved he was because of his health, he was still always like, that was still at the forefront of his mind.
Yeah.
And like you said, he never gave up. And I think that that's kind of how we are, is we'll have times in our life where we can't be as involved, you know, because of our family or because of personal things. But as long as we're always trying to make sure that we're doing what's right, I think that that will have an effect on things over time.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't write anything for the chrono system.
No, I think, I didn't go back and look in the book. I just looked it up online. And so I think it gave me a little more than what was covered.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, I'm like, oh, I missed that one.
No, don't even worry about it. Like, yeah, I'm all about like speed. So I'm like, Google Brendan von Bronner's system. Like, so sometimes you get a little more than you ask for with Google.
No, I just had it all together, so that was good.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of an awesome way to look at it, because that's just over time. Like, that's all that you do over time. And I think it's something that needs to be recognized, because I think we feel so down about ourselves sometimes. Like, oh, I didn't accomplish anything today, or like, I could have done this last year and I didn't, or, you know,
yeah,
things take lots of time and it's all of our efforts. Nike, stop. Over a period of time. And I like that it brought that up as like something valid, you know.
I think he brings up that point too at one time in the movie. He did I write it down? He just says that it's it's a drop at a time or something like that. Like, it's,
yeah.
I didn't type it out, but he said something like, when he's talking about imperfect order is better than no order. Anyways, yeah. He says we change things gradually. That's what he said.
Yeah.
So.
How did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence?
During one of their meetings, he brought up that they had, like, he's like, all we want to do is share truth. Like, we have it, we just need to let others see it as well. And he said, and then I quote, he said, we should hand it out to people, drop it from church roofs, paint pictures of it, and write songs about it. And it reminded me of the things that we've been learning in this class, because we had to share something on social media every week. And that's how we get it out. You know, we just spread what we already know. And that's how the idea, I think, came. Like, he's like, how do we let everybody know what we know, what we feel, help others feel that.
No, that's awesome. I thought, no, that was super cool. And what you just said, it was awesome, because Amazing Grace ended up being the song that was a way to share that. And thinking of it, like, our church has like a big, huge portion of the focus is singing in the church, you know, like,
yeah.
And I think that that's so powerful. When he got up there and started singing that the first time, it was like, oh my gosh, like, that was so cool, you know. And although it took, again, forever, like, that was a really cool way of being able to share the thoughts that they'd had, you know. What I liked about how they shared their research was they were very active in sharing. Like when the prime minister invited all those people over to Wilbur's house, he, like, the former slave had those chains, and he brought it up and he showed, you know, maybe it was the guy sitting next to him, but they had the chains that they would wear, and he showed Wilbur, this is what happens. And then the former slave guy was like, I had to be in a boat for like 13 weeks. We didn't have food. We, you know, and told of all the hardships, and it was coming from the mouth of somebody who had lived it. And then when they invited all those like fancy political people onto the boat and were giving them, like, saying it was like a treat for them, you know, to show their show them that they were grateful or whatever, and it ended up being like Wilbur showing them, like, this is, you know, this is what this is. That was super cool moment, and I just felt like if we were able to make sharing more active, you know, and showing those things. And I feel like the church has done a really good job with that, with like their Mormon messages, you know, that they have.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the more like personal we make it and the more like personally active we are, it's more persuasive. It's more, you know, real. So I like that. That's like one of the ways how they did things, is that they had people on the boat. They had, you know, not only did they have a list of names, but it was like a giant list of names. It was like a big thing to just like roll it out, you know. So I think that they did a really good job of hitting home with people.
Yeah, those two clips that you mentioned were probably my two favorites in the movie. When he sang, I feel like at first I was like, why didn't he just buy the slave and then set him free? That was my first thought. And then I was like, no, he wanted to teach them repentance, but in a peaceful way. And he wanted nothing to do with buying, like
trading a human soul.
Like he didn't want, that's not what he wanted to do. So when he came back and sang that song, I was like, he's doing it by sharing his talents. And that's what we are invited to do. Like we're invited to fight for our cause peacefully and share our talents and live by example. And that's exactly what he did. And when he went on that boat too, I mean, that was just incredible, because he, like you said, like when that guy, a former slave, brought those chains, he wanted people around him to feel, like he wanted Wilbur to feel what he felt. And I think he did, because it was like in his face, like, this is what happens. And then when the people were covering their faces because they could smell like the bodies, he was like, no, uncover your face, smell that, like, live it, you know. This is why I brought you guys here. And so I thought, yeah, those two things. And then the former slave that wrote that book sold over 50,000 copies in 2 months. That, I mean, the truth spread, and when people read that, even when they're like for slavery and they read every gory detail, that it changes their perspective, you know, especially if they're on the fence. And so I think that was another great thing that they did. And then the petition, like you said, like over 390 of the citizens signed it. I mean, what more can they ask for?
Yeah.
So they did a great job, like gathering all that evidence, and it took time. And I think it was, even though it didn't end it right away, because of corruption or whatever, it had an impression, like it it helped them with their cause in the future. So
oh yeah. Yeah. For sure. How does the film portray the importance of working together as a group? What has family advocacy group work taught you? Why do you think it's a good idea to discuss your thoughts with your peers each week in the HOA meetings? Well, what I really got from this was just like every single person played such a huge role.
Yeah.
And like you could go through each person, you know, like the prime minister who decided to have the original meeting to say, you know, and that lady who had one line in the movie or one line in life where she was like, you could do both.
Yeah.
Let's stop doing both. And like just that one sentence
Right.
changed everything. Like think about that. Like you were the lady who told him to do both.
Yeah.
And told him that he needed to do it, and he did because of that, you know?
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, the redheaded girl, she, even though he was scared and even though he thought it was what was making him sick, convinced him that he still needed to fight. And had she not convinced him that he still needed to fight, you know, it might have been a lot longer before, you know, real change happened.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty cool. And then just with like the HOA meetings, like it's been so fun to be able to see everybody else's perspective on things. And like my thoughts have, like I feel like my eyes have been open to different ways of thinking, you know, just like you brought up in that last question, using our talents to share like the Amazing Grace song. I thought that I didn't think of that originally, and I thought that was like such a key part, you know.
Yeah.
And like had we not discussed that, I would have thought about it, but it wouldn't have been like as pronounced, you know.
Yeah.
Because like I wouldn't have gotten to hear your thought processes, you know. And so I think that with these like meetings, all of us have different ways of thinking, and all of us have different thoughts, and it's so awesome to be able to share those things and be able to learn from one another. And I feel like the greatest thing that I've gotten from this class and with our meetings and everything and from that movie is that we're not alone. Even though it may feel like it,
yeah,
we're not alone in this like big scary fight, you know, like, or this never ending, never gonna win battle, you know.
Yeah.
That we have people who will support our cause, and we'll have people who will stand with us. And not only that, but they'll open our eyes to even more truth, you know.
Yeah. You basically said everything I had written down, so that was great. I think two more points. And you probably already talked about this, but they gave each other moral support. And I think, you know, although he was great, he's human, and he was sick and he was tired, and that lady took care of him, and his friend, like his preacher friend, you know, gave him advice. He looked for advice because he really didn't know what to do at times. And he brought up a point, and when one of the guys in one of his meetings, one of the guys said something like, things aren't going to change or whatever. I think it was towards the end of the movie, and he said, are you just coming here to, you know, to get rid of hope or whatever? And I think that team, that group that he had, gave him hope. And I think I saw that in our group. We each, like, when we were sharing things, we reevaluated our thoughts and also gave each other hope. And like you said, like we helped each other not feel alone, because I think that sometimes we're like, we do feel that way. But at least for me, it helped me, it helped me to know that I'm not the only one fighting for this cause. So, and everything else you already answered.
No, I feel like we were, that's the thing I also really like about this is most of us have like the same background, and like not the same background, but similar, and similar beliefs and similar ideas and ideals about society. And so that's been really nice. I think it would have been a lot harder, probably just as beneficial to have somebody else in the group that thought differently, but it's been really fun to just like when somebody speaks, it's like, oh, I would have said that exact same thing, or like I would have felt that exact same way, So yeah, I think that's another funny thing about this class is that all of us
too, like it's like,
yeah.
It helps you become stronger as a team.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alma 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices?
It's a lot of questions in one. in one.
I don't
know. So Captain Moroni fought for God. I went back and read some of it, but he fought for God, religion, freedom, peace, and family. And he took upon himself the name of Christ. I thought that Wilbur was like the perfect example of someone fighting for all those things. And he was like a perfect example of a Christian. So when I read this question, it made me think of when he sang Amazing Grace. Like he taught those people, like he shared his testimony, by singing. Like he didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to do anything, but that's the way he fought. He just spoke up for the things that other people were too afraid to do. So I think that's how he was like Captain Moroni. He wasn't afraid, to do those things.
To stand up. I definitely agree. For a couple of my things, I put Wilbur is like Captain Moroni because of how he can rally people together.
Yeah.
And he was able to just get everybody so on the same page,
Yeah.
Captain Moroni was a political leader, but his leading was founded in the principles of God.
Yeah.
And like Moroni, Wilbur kind of utilized his position and power to help bring forth God's work among the people. And like you were saying, both were fighting for the rights of families and of God's children. And like you were saying, Wilbur exemplifies a Christian and an advocate because he used both sides to accomplish the goals of God. He used Christ-like attributes to share his ideas and viewpoints. And even there were a couple of times when they were in like the voting hall or whatever, I don't know, I can't remember what it was called, but where they all get together, and he had some snarky comments to they were like so sassy back and forth, and I thought it was just so funny because like that's something that I would do, and we're like, I would say something a little sarcastic to be like, well, I think my component's an idiot, like
He lined
he's
them.
neglecting to see
Yeah.
this. Yeah, and it made me realize that, again, I love that you pointed out that he's saying, because that was, I feel like, more along the lines of being like a peaceful, Christ-like,
Yeah.
But it also made me laugh because in that moment he was relatable.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many people in that hall were like, okay, like I can definitely see where he's coming from, and that maybe that's something that I would say, or yeah, so that's what I liked, is I felt like he did both, because he used both sides to accomplish their goal.
Yeah, he made everybody laugh, and I don't know if you remember, but when one of the men turned, like he joined their team as somebody that was like completely unexpected. He's like, well, I'm gonna see what, and he told them, he's like, a lot of people agree with you. They're just too afraid to say anything. They're too afraid to and admit it, or, clap or whatever, that's support.
Yeah, they're scared.
I just thought that was just great, because we do
it's
that
so
sometimes too, like we're like, yeah, I believe in that, but I'm not going to say anything, or so I thought that was great. Like he was never afraid. He always stood up, and regardless of the consequences, he's like, I'm just going to say what's on my mind.
Yeah, even when it was like, dude, if you say something, it's going to be counted as like treason, like you're going to be standing up against King.
Yeah.
He was like, well, I'll do it anyway,
Yeah.
No, I definitely. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure that guy that you're talking about is Dumbledore. Like, pretty sure.
He kind of does look like him.
Oh, the voice is what got me. I was like, that's Dumbledore, and he's joining the right team. That sounds about right. But I love that you brought that up. Yeah, and I actually think that there's a part in the question in the beginning and later on, so I'll just keep that, because that's one of my answers.
I feel like I keep using
them. I know. Let's see. Okay, so Marcia Barlow spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did Wilbur and others exemplify any of Marcia's ideas, and how so? I felt like we've kind of already answered this one a lot, but they used a lot of emotional pull, like getting on the boat, and using personal examples and having people share their stories. That was a huge thing when we had our persuasive week or whatever, where we talked about persuasive speaking, was sharing our stories and sharing like the emotional side, because that's what people really want to hear. It's what really draws people in and makes people listen. It was super cool when the Prime Minister invited all those people over to Wilbur's house, and right before they did anything, Wilbur was like, well, what do you want to say to me? Like, why are you here? And the guy was like, we hear that you don't listen, so we're not here to talk, we're here to show you. And I was like, like, whoa. Like, holy cow. Like, it's so true. Most of the time, like, it's just like, even when I was watching that movie at points, like I said, I was trying to stay awake because I was so sick. And like, that moment was just like, oh my gosh, like sometimes we do need like a big sign, like just to show us like how important something is, or to make us stop and listen. And I think they did like the perfect examples and visual aids and stories, and just everything was so powerful.
It's funny how our brain works. This kind of has nothing to do with it, but I was just thinking, in my other class, we had to look at PowerPoint presentation, or each other's PowerPoint presentations, and I was kind of just, I mean, this is going to sound mean, but I was kind of skipping through the ones that didn't have pictures or like a little video or something, just because
Yeah.
I'd rather, not because it wasn't good content, but just because you pick and choose what
It's
ones
hard to
you want
follow.
to watch, and I rather I sound like a little kid, but that's how our brain works.
No,
We're human, and we're like, oh, this is more interesting to me. So
you were spot on. Seriously, like we had one of our classes, we had to do the same thing, and we had to like grade each other's like PowerPoints and presentations and stuff. And when they didn't have anything that like would draw attention, I would say it like, this isn't, it's not something that I would
yeah,
normally, you know, like I think there's like something that said that it takes, I think like a half a second to decide whether or not we'll stay on a channel, or
yeah,
like when we're flipping through the channels, we'll give half a second to see if we want to stay on that channel. Half a second to see like whether or not we're interested, or whether or not we want to put our time and effort into that.
yeah,
Like, that's crazy. And we're already being lazy as it is, like half a second, you know?
yeah.
And like thinking about having to put effort into something, it's like I have half a second to decide whether or not this is worth it. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that decision's made super fast. And if we want anybody to be interested, we can't just have like a bunch of, you know, rambling that doesn't seem interesting, or just like, you know, it was the personal stories, it was the, you know, the visual effects of the chains, the visual of the amount of names being signed, the visual of the being on the boat, you know,
Yeah.
and the smells, and
Yeah.
those all make you stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You know, I think it's always been that way. And Marcia Barlow, she explained it really well. And I think that even now, like in the world that we live in with all the technology and stuff, I think that's why it's like half a second, because that's just, you know, we have to work with how the world is if we want to persuade them. And the technology based world now, you just have to
Keep up.
put in the extra effort, a little bit more work, but if we want them to listen. So
Yeah, I agree. What role did government and policy and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? Did you see their political system being pro-family? Why or why not?
You know, this was an interesting question, because I didn't really feel like their government was corrupt. I felt like when they got together in their meetings, no one really interrupted. Like if they interrupted, they would all take turns and talk and hear each other's opinions and stuff. So I can't really say like they were a pro family or not. When they were talking about slaves, they never really, there was a few incidents where they were like, oh, you know, they didn't really care about them, but they were mostly talking about like the economical side of it.
The business side.
Yeah. So, I mean, even though it wasn't right, and it took Wilbur a really long time, it was going in the right direction. And he talked about how, you know, we need a government, and that's the way he was going to work through. Like, he didn't want to start a revolution. He didn't want to, I don't know, do it any other way. So I just feel like maybe I didn't fully understand it, but in my opinion, I don't really think that they were like against the family.
Anti-family.
They were just like confused. Like they're like
Yeah.
they just needed somebody to guide them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
My thought process was like it was pretty obvious in the beginning like how against it they were, like everybody. But like eventually everyone realized the importance of abolishment and decided to carry it through. I feel like government, regardless of whether it's like a perfect government or not, is always going to be a little bit on the selfish side.
Yeah.
And selfish in the fact that they're focused on maintaining their power and, you know,
Yeah.
and so it was easy to see that when like they put other things over the importance of family, if that makes sense.
That makes
Like
sense. Yeah.
they put like when it came to the French invading, they're like, well, if we're not doing it, then the French are going to be doing it. And so they put more political things above the importance of not necessarily families, but the importance of lives, if that makes sense.
Human rights.
So yeah, so I feel like government will do not chew on that. Naughty girl. Sorry. She's eating my power cord. No.
Oh, no.
No. Luckily it wasn't that bad. No, you can't come say sorry now. I feel like the government will be pro-family when it benefits them and when it like fits into their agenda. And if it kind of will like mess things up a little bit, then then it's not like their most important goal.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like they were only able to gather up like enough courage and enough strength to be pro like life, pro human rights, when it was like, okay, the French aren't a threat now. We can like maybe we can start slowly stopping the slave trade. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, they I think I agree. They were selfish in the way that, you know, when they brought up the economical side, they're like, you know, what are we going to do with the plantations? You know, our economy is going to crash. It's like, yeah, but you have a human life here. You know, what's more important? You're right. It was like,
but I mean, they were able to maintain like a huge nation by doing it the way that they did. So I mean, like, you know, like, because I mean, they were right. Had they have just stopped slavery, I mean, the French might have ended up taking them over, and you know, so like, it's hard because like I'm so glad we don't have anything like that big going on now. You know,
I know.
Because while Wilbur could easily see the importance of a life, you know, I wonder how many of those people, while yes, some may have been selfish in keeping power, realized, hey, if we do stop this right this second, we'll lose a nation.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, you know, a boat.
Yeah.
You know, but like to what degree, you know? So it's like hard. Because I mean, like, I can't imagine being in that position where it's like, okay, well, if we decide to stop slavery right now, we could risk having a whole nation destroyed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can see where you're coming from, where you say, like, I don't necessarily think they were anti-family, you know, but I don't necessarily think they were pro-family either.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about the revolution in how we had a revolution. And I was talking to my husband about it, and I said that could have easily gone like wrong if this country wasn't founded with God's hand in it. It could have turned into like a dictator. You never know what's going to happen with a revolution, and it didn't, because this is the promised land, and we know that as members of the church. But in England, like you said, that's why politics are so hard, and it's so hard to stay true and not be corrupt. And so he didn't care. He wanted to do the right thing regardless. Like, he wanted to fight for human rights, and he did it. Not forever, but he did it. That was good. So
let's see. Do you feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well? How did you see him showing the elements of consecration that Elder Christofferson spoke of?
I think we can both agree that he did use his time on Earth well.
Yeah.
Like I've mentioned before, one thing I admire about him was that he never gave up. He could have easily left it in the hands of somebody else to fight for this cause, but he wanted to do it. A little stubborn too, but in a good way. After years of failed attempts, he was like almost dying and sick, and had other responsibilities. But I feel like he felt like he had that calling from God that he needed to fulfill. And if we compare that to us and what Elder Christofferson talked about, we also have a purpose and a calling. And we need to use our talents to bless the lives of others. Not just our lives and our families, but everybody else. And not be selfish.
Yeah. That's exactly what I had. I feel like it would have been really easy, like you said, when he was so sick, to just be like, okay, y'all manage. I'm gonna go die now. See ya. I thought that was just so inspiring, because it's so easy to get discouraged. And the fact that even though he did get discouraged, he never let it stop him. Brings back to what I said before, though. Much of us, like his life, have waves of consecration. Sometimes we may have really high amounts, and other times it's lower. What matters is that we're always trying to make the world a better place as much as we are able. And I feel like even though he had those times where he wasn't as involved, that it was still his life. He was still consecrated to the work. And that was what I thought was one of the most amazing qualities about him, is he was always consecrated to the work.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to child and family advocacy? So like you were talking about, when Dumbledore, that's what I'm going to call him, was like, I know that other people feel the same way I do. They were just scared. And that one guy immediately, the longer haired guy, he turned on, he's like, well, shame on them, and shame on all the people. And Dumbledore was like, no, not shame. Like, it's hard. Yeah. Like, this is like, and he went on to explain, like, how am I supposed to sit there and say that I need to abolish my livelihood, that I need to abolish, you know, all these different aspects of not only my life, but like my family's, the lives of those around me. Like, you know, how am I supposed to gather up the courage to tell everyone that what they're doing is wrong? And, you know, and I thought that that was so true of this. Stop biting on her collar. Oh, my dogs are being such sass pantses. But I just felt like I felt that before, you know, where, like, for example, there's this group of friends that I've had in high school, and we've all kind of stayed in contact over the last 6 years that we've been apart. And like anytime we're all in town, we get together and we go to lunch. And like recently we had in the last like year or so, we started a group message where like, if, you know, we just send pictures or like, this is what I'm doing today, or like, you know, both good and bad things go through there. Like, oh my gosh, my cat destroyed my whole house, or like, you know. And it's been something that's been really good because like I live in the middle of nowhere and I don't have friends here. And so like it's nice to feel like I'm not alone. And I know that many of them, but there's this girl in our group who she hasn't been married. She hasn't gotten married yet, or been like, she was engaged but ended up breaking it off. And she's just always been very negative and very kind of rude to anybody in the group who has something to be happy about. And she's always been that way, even since we were like, even when we were in high school, she was just very, very rude and negative and like pessimistic towards us. But like for some reason we were always like, oh, that's just Kaylee, like she's just blunt. And we always gave her like excuses and kind of like just enabled her to continue to be so rude. Well, lately, because she's not married, and the last of our, like, other than her, of our friends just got married this last month. And she sent us this thing, and it was like an article, and the title of the article was When My Friends Get Engaged, Told by the Grinch, or whatever. And it was just like a bunch of memes of, you know, the movie, which I personally love that movie, but it was like all negative things about marriage and getting married and like just really not okay. And like I finally was like, that's not cool, you know? So I, not wanting to cause a huge problem, but not also not wanting to say like stand up. I just sent like a little emoji of salt. It's like, you're being so salty, like knock it off, like, you know, be happy for people. And, you know, if you're positive and do good in your life, like you'll have those same experiences. And she replied back and she's like, I'm not being salty, like it was just a joke, I thought it was funny. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe send it to your single friends, like, but it's not really appropriate to sit there and say like how unhappy you are and how unsupportive you are about our decisions, you know, and like the joys in our life. Like that's not what a friend does. And she ended up saying like basically how our group message made her feel awful about herself, which is insane because we supported her like crazy and always showered her with love. But like I just told her, I was like, friends don't do that. Friends are happy for each other, even when like they're going through hard times themselves. And like, we've always done that for you. And like, you've succeeded in so many areas that many of us haven't. And we're not tearing you down for it. We're celebrating with you, you know? And she ended up like leaving the group message. She's like, well, this is just like unbeneficial for me now or whatever. And like I apologize to my other friends in the group, like I'm sorry, but like I don't agree with that. Like I don't feel like it's okay to bash not only like us as people, but the ideals that we all have, especially when it comes to marriage, something that's so important and sacred, like, you know. And everybody agreed with me and everything, but like it has been like a long time coming because she always does it. And I was like, I'm not gonna support you in bashing the most fundamental part of the gospel. Like, I'm sorry, but like I'm not gonna sit there and enable you to do this anymore. And so like even though like I was scared to death, I was like, and I felt bad because like I never wanted to hurt her feelings, but I also feel like she's not gonna find happiness and she's not gonna find somebody to marry if she keeps acting that way, you know?
Yeah.
And so like it's like it can be so scary just to even like something as small as that,
Yeah.
just to stand up and say like I don't agree with that, you know?
Yeah.
And like I can't imagine taking it to the next step and like advocating for, you know, something as huge as Wilbur did, you know? And I feel like this class has helped me kind of gain more confidence and gain more like strength in my conviction to be able to stand up for things, you know?
That's great, Cassie. Good for you. It is something small, but even something like you're standing up for marriage, and I don't know if I would have done that, you know, even though if it was like something I felt was unfair for everybody else or for myself. Like
Yeah.
that's what we should be doing. And I think it starts with little things like that. For me, the movie, this class, it's given me hope. That the way I'm living will inspire others maybe to try to do the same. Um, Inspire me to be better, even in small ways. Try to please the Lord, you know. Um, it helped me to understand the power um, of uniting with others that feel the same way as we do, um, because we're not the only ones, and if we can find the ones and unite and form a group and speak up, then we can make a difference. I put this film inspired me to not be afraid to share the truth, even though we will be judged, laughed at, befriended sometimes. We'll be happy in the end because we're following what's in our hearts. Just like Wilbur, you know, he followed what was in his heart, and it was a happy ending at the very end. But yeah, I love watching movies like that because it's a true story, and you know,
It's so good.
yeah.
One of my favorite lines that the redhead chick said, she was like, from what I understand, if you have a bad taste in your mouth, you spit it out.
Yeah.
And like it was so blunt and so forward. And she's like, you don't keep swallowing it back down. And the way, like, there's obviously ways to do it in a Christ-like manner, you know, and like how he stood up for things was the right way to do it. But I just loved that she was so forward and saying like, you don't swallow this down. Like, stop. It's gonna kill you.
Yeah.
Like, you have to share and talk about this and change it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like I've been more active on Facebook when it comes to things of like touchier subjects lately. Just because I've had that feeling of like, I have a bad taste in my mouth and I want to be able to get rid of it, you know? And like, just for example, there was when the church came out and made that rule that a child would have to wait until they were older to be baptized if they had gay parents.
Yeah. I didn't
That
really
was,
understand that, but I did hear about it.
there was a huge uproar about that And like I saw so much negative, hateful feedback on my social media that it was insane. And then there was so much stuff that I was seeing on my feed about the announcement of the Pocatello Temple. That's where I'm from. There was so many people who were so negative about that, and like it broke my heart to see such like hate and anger, you know, because I mean, like with the new policy of the baptism, waiting to be baptized, bandit stop. Like I can see why people would be upset about that if they didn't understand it, you know. And it's when people don't have the strongest testimonies or convictions about and have faith, it can be so easy to be like thrown off by things or to be distracted by like, you know. And I just felt like in each time I wrote a little, like just a little thing, but like about the baptism, I just got on there and I was like, hey, like everybody who wants to be a member of the church and anybody who wants to follow God will have that opportunity. It was like Heavenly Father wants to protect families. He doesn't want children to be confused or, you know, rebel against their parents or, you know, have to say that their parents are in the wrong. You know, that's not really fair to them.
Yeah.
It's not fair to expect that of them either, you know. And it's like anybody who wants to be baptized or who wants to follow Christ will have that opportunity regardless.
Yeah.
You know, and it all came down to whether or not, you know, you believe that our prophets are prophets, you know, and our apostles are apostles and true men of God. And I, you know, just simply like bore my testimony, like that's what I believe. Like I believe that they are, and like this, although it could be confusing, it makes sense to me. And even if it didn't, I would still have faith enough to know that my Heavenly Father knows a lot more about life than I do.
Yeah.
You know? And so like in those moments, like I posted one that I shared about the Pocatello Temple. I shared it in our like group discussion board or whatever. But like I've been a lot more vocal about things, but I've tried really hard to make it, when I do, that it's very loving and open and, you know, kind and never like accusatory, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that like, I don't know, I feel like this movie was a really great example of how to do that, you know, of how to share and how to stand up for things while encompassing all of the principles that Heavenly Father would expect us to use, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. So did that policy change, or was it like something they were thinking about changing?
so the policy, and I might get like details wrong because I haven't looked at it in a while, but the policy changed that, so it is enacted right now, I'm pretty sure, that children of gay parents have to wait to be baptized.
Wait for what?
I think it's till 18, but I'm not like 100%. It could be a different age. I think it's 16 or 18, something like that. And the reason being is because when you're baptized, you have to, you know, they didn't want children looking at their parents and saying like, I don't agree with how you are. And I think that and by being baptized, I'm saying that I don't agree with you being together, you know? So it was basically just to, because I mean, they're still their parents. They're still under, when they're 8 and all the way up to though that child leaves the house, like the church is saying that they have to acknowledge and respect their parents, basically. And they don't want those children to
That makes sense.
turn away from their parents or, you know, And there's like so many different things that are involved with being baptized. You know, it's saying, I believe, and I'm showing, and I'm going to commit to this lifestyle, and I'm going to stay away from, and I'm staying from anything else, you know? And so that's how I took it, is this Heavenly Father's looking out for his kids. He doesn't want parents and children to clash, you know, or collide and to be at ends with each other. He wants them to live in a happy household where everybody is, you know, one, regardless of how parents decide to be married or who they decide to be married to. It's not that child's responsibility to, you know, and I think that it can be like, you can talk to your bishop about different things, and if, you know, each individual situation with most things in the gospel can be discussed with a bishop and have, you know, things brought up and stuff. But it was a big deal, and it was saying that it was like, we're condemning those children, and it's not that. We just want, like, I felt like it was Heavenly Father just wants a peaceful household, if that makes sense. And having a kid basically say, I don't believe what you're doing, you know, it's kind of rebellious in a way to those parents, and not really, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
There's a lot of stuff, I think, probably still online about it. But I read a couple of different LDS articles, like people who were LDS, you know, describing how they thought about it and stuff. And because at first, like, I was kind of right along that line. It was like, how rude, like, how terrible is that? Like, that's not okay. And the more, like, I thought about it, I was like, Heavenly Father would never do anything to hurt or penalize his children, you know?
Yeah.
He would only do things to make sure that they're protected, that their parents are taking care of them, that they aren't, like, forced out of the household, or, you know, or in a contentious place with their family, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, that was a big one for me, because I was like, I feel like I'm pretty accepting, and like, I'm not very pushy when it comes to, like, forcing other people to believe what I believe, and I will hang out and be friends with and love anybody who is, like, a good, kind person, regardless of their life choices, you know?
Yeah.
And so when that came out, it was hard for me. And I remember talking to my husband about it. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. He was like, well, that's okay. Like, it's okay to have, like, questions and concerns. Like, that's what Heavenly Father wants us to do, you know?
I'm like, you know, my sister-in-law, when I met my husband, she was kind of in the middle of a divorce, and with 4 small children. And well, they were probably, like, the youngest was probably like 5 to 10 or whatever. And he became gay and full on out of the closet. Like, long story short, the issue came up with the youngest baptismal date coming up. So it's just interesting that you brought that up, because she explained it to us and I really wasn't paying attention. Just it's a huge family and there was a lot going on. But anyways, he was allowed to, but he doesn't live with the father. Like, he gets visitation.
Yeah.
She's amazing. Like, she just forgave him, and they're amicable for the kids and stuff like that. And he was able to get baptized. And I think the oldest was the 2 oldest boys were able to receive the priesthood and everything. And I think they talked to her about it, but maybe it didn't pertain because they live with her, and she's a single mother or whatever. But I remember hearing about that and not really understanding it. But I'm not as open-minded as as everybody else. No, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. Maybe I just don't understand certain things, and the way you explained it absolutely makes sense. I mean, if they have to wait in order for the family to have peace in the home, and just, when they're ready or whatever, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It didn't, like I said, it didn't apply to them, maybe because they live with her. So it was great,
Yeah.
because I feel like they can receive the Holy Ghost and have that to be a guidance in their lives, and
Yeah.
maybe they could even understand things a little bit better too. I don't know. It's like a sad situation, but
well, it's so hard. I mean, like, I can't imagine being in that position, And I think, like, it's easy to say, like, oh, well, it's denying those kids blessings and so forth. But I feel like Heavenly Father would never, like, keep the spirit from them, or, like, and I mean, like, even if you're not baptized, yeah, they're children. And, like, my thought process is just that it's to protect those families, and it's to protect those children from being confused, and because I mean, like, it's not saying, like, you can't go to church. It's not saying you can't,
yeah,
do those things. It's just, until you're of age and your parents aren't responsible for you, and you're not under your parents' household rules,
yeah,
like, probably best just to keep peace within the home, and to, because I mean, could you imagine, like, having your parents be gay, and, like, just every time, just, like, just the confusion as a little kid that would cause,
yeah,
So I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do also with time comes understanding,
yeah.
and teaching experiences and learning experiences, and
I agree.
I don't know. So, but I would assume with your family that it was probably because that they were living with her.
Yeah,
But like I said, like, each individual case is different. Everybody's family lives are different, and, like, my father-in-law's the bishop right now, and, like, he has a lot of different takes on things than I would expect,
yeah,
And so, like, each individual is different, and I don't know. I think I recently I've just had a lot of experiences with people who have wavering faith,
yeah,
And, like, I can see it if, like, they'll come up with different things, like, oh, well, I don't come to church because I don't like somebody in the bishopric, like, they treated me wrong once, or, like, I don't know how a church could support, making that decision, or, and it's like, some of it is because, like, initially, like, had I had stuck with my, like, initial feelings, I probably still would have been, like, upset about it,
yeah,
And because my first thought process is, everybody deserves the right to be able to be baptized, and everybody deserves the right to be able to have those blessings. But after I think about it, everybody does have that right and does have those blessings. And if they're living the life that they're supposed to, they'll have those blessings.
yeah,
And even, it's just, it's that part where, like, you have to have that faith that, like, everything will be taken care of in the end.
yeah,
And it can be so hard because, and I feel like in this social media world too, like, it's so easy to be, like, quick to, like, jump on board of, like, oh, that makes me angry,
yeah,
or, oh, I support that, but I don't support that because that,
yeah,
we live up in North Dakota, where my family, we own a water hauling company for oil businesses. Half the world right now is so anti-oil, it's kind of scary because that's my life.
yeah,
Like, that's what I do. That's what my husband does. That's what'll help our family be raised and have a place to live. And, like, I can see how people can be so angry about it, but I've also seen how so many people irrationally jump to conclusions about certain things. And I've seen myself irrationally jump to conclusions about certain things.
Yeah.
And I think like in this movie, I bet people were like, oh, he's just irrationally jumping to conclusions about things. And when they were like, the French will take us over, that's irrational jumping to conclusion about things, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's so many things in life where it's like, I don't know. This all ties into what does your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester and how has it changed? This is all kind of worked into that question.
Yeah.
So, but you know, like, I don't know. I just feel like what Wilbur did in that movie, he sat there. He sat on the wet grass and he got his butt wet and he looked at the things of God and he contemplated, you know? And that's something that I think that is skipped a lot in this time, you know, in that half a second time where we decide, you know, are we deciding to sit there and contemplate it, or are we just deciding to join its side, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that this semester has definitely changed for me. And it's something I've been learning gradually over time, is just trying to understand and gain like a full understanding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say too. Like, I've always felt passionate about the family, but this class has helped me to understand that I need to know the issues well.
Yeah.
Not only to be persuasive, but to be understanding and to be able to have a conversation that's going to take that'll go somewhere. And you just brought it up about Wilbur and going out. You know, I feel like he was like pondering, and in the church we're asked to not only ask God, but find a time to ponder and think. And I think that that's when we'll receive our answer. Like you said, like at first I didn't understand it, but you probably wanted to understand it and you didn't want to like, okay, I'm not going to church anymore. This is just too much for me. Like, if you want to understand it, Heavenly Father is going to help you, I think. If you take the time to let him in and give you those answers. Not that that's what I thought when he was like out in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, he's praying. He's like pondering and trying to figure it out. You know? So that was
cool. Love that. Spider webs. So this kind of the last, let's see. The last question is, picture your spouse, children, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. And my overall thought is I feel like this class has given me the, sorry.
It's okay.
There we go. This class has kind of helped me have a desire to be very well-rounded, if that makes sense, to be involved and to understand, and just to have the desire to be knowledgeable in these things because of how important they are. And I feel like this class has also given me the courage to stand up and actually say those things. You know, I want to be an example to my children. And I feel like this class has helped me have the resources to be able to do that eventually, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I grew up a little different than most people in the church. My family were converts, and so we're also minorities. Well, California is like all minorities, but I was never really, politics were never talked in our home. I learned everything in school, but it was never in our home. And I think that there is power behind that. And before this class, I hadn't thought about it, but I want my children to understand the Constitution and to be grateful for our freedoms and to really understand those things, not just to like go to school and say the Pledge of Allegiance, if that's even allowed anymore, but to really like be respectful of our leaders, even if we don't agree with them, and know the history and understand. My husband was raised that way, and it's been such a blessing in his life, and it's been a blessing in my life because I see things from a different perspective. Like I wasn't, not that I didn't like care, but I even feel like this class has helped me become a little more conservative on some issues that I didn't know, because I was always like, no, I'm a Democrat because I fight for minorities and immigrants and people who are less fortunate. Yeah. But this class has really like opened my eyes to how I really feel and what is most important to me, and it's family and it's liberty, and I think I'm leaning more this way now. And so it's just been great. It's been such a blessing because that's how I want to raise my kids. And I want them to choose for themselves, of course, but I want to persuade them, start with your family and start with your kids and then go out into the community and try to persuade them. But it's just benefited me in so many different ways. It's just amazing. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, that's our goal, is to persuade people. And I feel like with our kids, like I might not persuade them to be like left or right or Republican or Democratic, but hopefully persuade them to have the desire and motivation to learn, to understand those things, like you were saying. I want to persuade my children to be educated about, like you said, the Constitution, and for, religious freedom, and for the right to be able to say, like, this is what I believe. And like, I think like it's so hard in this, I feel like in this country sometimes with a left or a right or a Democrat or a Republican, because I feel like this is where the world doesn't understand the importance of family, because each side, I think, thinks they're fighting for the family, but there's no one that has the complete way to do that, and that's where having the knowledge of the gospel and the knowledge of Heavenly Father's plan is like so important, because nobody else knows exactly how important the family is, or how necessary it is to have a healthy family atmosphere for growth, for for prosperity. And I think that you said it perfectly. It's just working on your families first, and then going out and convincing the world of it, And even if it's convincing them in small little Facebook posts, or like, talking to one other person. I know that you've opened things up for me that I had never thought of, and same with the rest of our group. It's being able to look outside yourself, which is so hard, because I feel like we all have this feeling of like innate knowledge, like, oh, I know that I would never, like, that would never be right. In my heart, I know that. And I know that in my heart, I'd never be wrong, or like, and so many people are like that, rather than, like on my mission, I did my best to ask everybody about their own religious beliefs. And even if I knew they were not going to be a potential investigator, like we would go to a religious college that was in my area, and I would go and learn about other people's religions, just because like I want to be able to understand people better. Understand people and understand, I mean, with us, the knowledge of God, like that Heavenly Father has given us, and the understanding that they're a child of God, the easier it is to help bring everybody together. And that's where a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why there's such a big divide sometimes, is because there's a lack of understanding, you know?
Yeah.
And being willing to learn how to love somebody, or, you know, how to help somebody. And so I feel like that's what this class has really shown me, is that like I need to do so much better at looking outside myself, because I'm definitely one of those people where it's like, no, I thought it's right. Like that was my first feeling. Like I know it's right. Like I wouldn't get a feeling unless it wasn't right, you know?
Yeah.
And I've had so many experiences where people have just completely changed how I see things, you know? And that's what Heavenly Father wants. He wants us to be able to go out there and to have those interactions that we've had this semester with everybody.
Amen.
Well, I think that should be good. I can send you the link to this. Let's see. I'll just copy this. I'm going to send this in a little chat thing. See if you can copy it.
Oh, yeah.
And then they said to put that at the bottom of your page.
Oh, whoa.
So I think only one of us, what?
No, nothing. Sorry. Can you do that
okay.
again for me?
Send it again.
Yeah.
Did it pop up?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. Sorry. I think only one of us needs it, but I feel like it's always good just to make sure that it's there and there's no confusion. So
you want to stop recording, or?